Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 94. We're going to talk about Mom from 1990. I had watched this on Tubi. I had not seen this before. As always, we start with the prominent crew and cast. Also, links in the show notes for the complete crew and cast list. This was directed by Paul Rand. It was written by Paul Rand and Kevin Watson. Effects makeup by Tony G, I think. Now, Mom is Patrick Rand's only directorial credit. It's one of two movies he wrote. He's done more work as an editor, most notably Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. This is also Kevin Watson's only writing credit. He's got many more credits as an actor. This film is one of Tony G's earliest jobs, but he has a much longer list of effects makeup credits on quite a few high-profile movies, which is why I think he started on this movie. The cast includes Mark Thomas Miller as Clay Dwyer, Jeannie Bates as Emily Dwyer, Brian James as Nestor Duvalier, Mary Beth McDonough as Alice, billed as Mary McDonough, Art Evans as Lieutenant Hendricks, Stella Stevens as Beverly Hills, Claudia Christian as Virginia Monroe, and Marae Aries as Carla. Now, Mark Thomas Miller got his big break in the NBC series Misfits of Science in 1985. His career stalled in 1991 as a result of a disfiguring accident. Mark made a minor attempt to revive his career, but found he had lost the patience required for the business of acting. So this is a treat. Jeannie Bates' second credit in Hollywood was a minor role in the great werewolf film, The Return of the Vampire from 1943. Seriously recommended. She worked for almost 60 years, doing mostly television work after starting her career in movies. She finished with another batch of films at the end, including her last role in David Lynch's Mulholland Drive in 2001. Brian James is a veteran of over 100 television and 120 movie roles over his 30-year career. I immediately recognized James from his role as the replicant Leon in Blade Runner from 1982. Mary Beth McDonough began her career as a child actor, portraying Erin Walton in the series The Waltons from 1972 until 1981. She reprised the role in 7 Walton television reunion films. Art Evans' best-known role in a 40-year career is probably in Die Hard 2 from 1990. Stella Stevens kicked off her career as a Playboy playmate and starred in The Nutty Professor in 1963 as Jerry Lewis's love interest. She went on to a 50-year career. Claudia Christian booked her first TV job as a teenager on Dallas, and she's still working today. She became a sci-fi icon, portraying Susan Ivanova in the Hugo and Emmy award-winning series Babylon 5, which is when I first saw her. Marae Aries is not only an actress, but also a professional dog trainer. This film shows promise with its unique perspective and thought-provoking concept. It manages to create some unique tension and genuinely unsettling moments. However, despite these strengths, it ultimately falls short of being truly entertaining or enjoyable. While I appreciate the filmmaker's efforts, I can't wholeheartedly recommend it due to its lack of cohesion and its overall missed impact. So now let's move on to the synopsis. In Lucky Springs, California, a mysterious man in black leather transforms into a werewolf and kills Ginny, a pregnant young woman, at a bus stop on Christmas Eve. This murder is linked to similar killings in Texas and Florida, all targeting pregnant young women. Emily Dwyer learns that she's going to be a grandmother when her son Clay, a news reporter, and his wife Alice announce their pregnancy. Shortly after, Nestor Duvalier, the werewolf, rents Emily's spare room, pretending to be blind. He attacks Emily, transforming her into a werewolf. As Emily adjusts to her new condition, Nestor teaches her to hunt. They feed on victims together, with Emily developing a preference for killing and eating homeless men. Clay grows suspicious and eventually witnesses his mother in mid-transformation eating a homeless person. When confronted, Emily admits the truth. Nestor explains their need to consume human flesh, but is killed when Clay sets him on fire. Now, Emily continues to crave human meat, sneaking out at night to feed, despite Clay's attempts to lock her up. She accidentally kills an undercover cop, which draws police attention. Clay's life begins to unravel as he struggles to cope with his mother's condition, jeopardizing his job and his marriage. In desperation, Clay brings home a prostitute for his mother to feed on, but he can't go through with it. Emily ends up eating the woman anyway, adding to Clay's guilt and stress. Emily manages to convince Clay that she's recovered, leading him to return home. However, Alice kicks him out, and he loses his job. Clay's sister Carla returns home after leaving her husband. Clay, now completely unhinged, finds Carla's dead body in Emily's kitchen. He attempts to burn Emily like he did Nestor, but it fails. He then ties her to her bed and disposes of Carla's body. The story climaxes when Alice, two detectives, and Clay converge at Emily's home. Alice unknowingly frees Emily, who goes on a rampage, killing one detective, knocking out the other, and threatening Alice and her unborn child. When Emily throws Clay out of a window, she finally realizes what she's become. And in that moment of clarity and remorse, Emily retreats to her kitchen and uses the gas stove to immolate herself, ending her reign of terror. Transformation scenes are fairly basic. Almost every one starts with contact lenses in the eyes. The film then cuts to a witness who recoils in horror before cutting back to the full makeup job. A couple of times this is done twice to show an intermediate stage. Speaking of the makeup job, it's fine. Nothing spectacularly good or bad about it. It certainly has a bestial and feral quality to it, even if it's not explicitly wolf-like. It's not dynamic, and we never see the makeup for long. So here's the thing. I'm not certain Nestor and Emily are actual werewolves. It also doesn't really matter. They certainly meet my definition. They're human beings who change into predatory beings under certain conditions and then change back. These two need to eat human flesh to survive. It's hunger that transforms them, hunger that triggers the transformation. Clay calls them werewolves, but Nestor isn't hung up on titles. He's fine being called a werewolf. He's equally fine with vampire or ghoul. And the only information we get could easily match werewolf, vampire, or ghoul lore. The monsters here are the bare, basic essence of all three creatures. As a consequence, we can't draw firm correlations with broader werewolf lore. There's no mention of the moon influencing Nestor or Emily. The only thing that hurts them is fire, although even that is frustratingly inconsistent in the film. Fire can't hurt Emily until the plot needs fire to actually work. It's no surprise that a film called Mom has a relationship between child and mother at the core of it. At the beginning of the film, Clay and Emily have a strong and loving relationship. Clay is a good son. Emily is a good mother. Carla is not a good daughter. This makes the transformation so much more tragic and impactful. In the story, Emily's metamorphosis into a werewolf represents the sudden and often shocking changes that can occur in aging parents. Just as his mother's new condition and the accompanying behavioral changes blindside Clay, adult children are frequently unprepared for the rapid decline in their parents' physical or mental health. This transformation can be as jarring and unbelievable as a werewolf metamorphosis, leaving family members struggling to reconcile the person they knew with the one before them now. Now, to be clear, the film certainly doesn't try to tie lycanthropy to any specific physical or psychological condition that affects older individuals. Instead, it just reflects common and general aging consequences and their impacts. Now, first up, there is the loss of independence and identity. Emily's newfound need to feed on human flesh can be seen as a parallel to any aging parent's increasing dependence on their children. Emily needs help obtaining victims without drawing undue attention. This loss of independence can be as distressing for the parent as it is for the child. This leads to the caregiver's burden. Clay struggles to cope with his mother's condition, and this reflects the immense stress that caregivers often face. He attempts to lock Emily up at night, and that mirrors the difficult decisions that children must make, sometimes to ensure their parents' safety. Sometimes that cost is their parents' freedom. The strain on Clay's job and marriage is a common reality for many caregivers who find their personal and professional lives suffering as they devote more and more time and energy to their parents' care. On another level, there are implications in Emily's rationalizations of her murderous needs and impulses. Now, Nestor hunts pregnant women, among the most vulnerable of victims. He preys on the literal future of society. Initially, Emily expresses a preference for the homeless victims as a way to deny to herself how monstrous she's becoming. She unintentionally exposes that she doesn't view vagrants, drunks, drug users, and the mentally ill as fully valuable human beings. She even hints that she's doing society a service by culling such individuals. They are worth less to her than others. Clay himself temporarily succumbs to this way of thinking when out of desperation, he brings home a prostitute for his mother to feed on. This could represent the extreme measures and moral compromises that caregivers might consider in their attempt to meet their parents' needs. The guilt and stress Clay experiences are familiar emotions for many adult children caring for parents with demanding conditions. Now, the return of Clay's sister Carla and her subsequent death at Emily's hands could symbolize how the care of an aging parent can strain sibling relationships. Often, the burden of care falls unequally, leading to resentment and conflict. Carla is oblivious to what is happening to her mother, and While it is true that Emily and Clay deliberately keep Carla ignorant out of a desire to protect the memory of what Emily was, Carla has so far removed herself from the rest of the family. Remember, she begs out of a planned Christmas visit at the last minute for selfish and shallow reasons that she's willingly abandoned any familial responsibilities or obligations. Of course, Carla pays for that with her life, an example of how horror movies can turn moral and ethical lessons into grisly plot fodder. The burden of dealing with Emily falls squarely on Clay, just when he's preparing to become a parent himself. Finally, the climactic scene where Emily realizes what she's become and ends her own life is a representation of the moment many aging parents accept their decline and the burden that they're placing on their children. It can also represent the difficult decisions that families face regarding end-of-life care. Now, the film is not arguing that elderly people should all just, burn themselves up once they become difficult to care for. It's exaggerated for effect. That's what horror movies do. The werewolf narrative is an extreme metaphor. It effectively highlights the profound challenges and the sudden drastic changes, the loss of independence, the caregiver's burden, the guilt and desperation, the strain on family relationships, and the ultimate final loss are all themes that the werewolf movie exaggerates for effect. But they do resonate with real life experiences that people have. This story reminds us that dealing with aging parents is a complex, emotional, and sometimes horrifying experience. It requires compassion, patience, and often personal sacrifice. Just as Clay struggled with his mother's transformation, many adult children grapple with the changes in their parents, trying to balance care for their own lives and well-being with care for their parents' lives. Ultimately, the tale is a reminder of the importance of preparing for and openly discussing the challenges of aging within families. It underscores the need for support systems, both emotional and practical, for those who have to navigate the often turbulent waters of elder care. But I also want to take just a second to flip the script a little and examine this film as a potential metaphor for the often hidden and horrifying reality of elder abuse. In the story, Emily's transformation into a werewolf can be seen as a metaphor for the vulnerability that comes with age. Just as Emily becomes susceptible to Nestor's influence, many elderly individuals become increasingly vulnerable to manipulation and abuse as they age. The initial attack by Nestor transforming Emily represents the moment when an elderly person falls victim to an abuser, often someone that they've trusted or depended on. Nestor's act of teaching Emily to hunt and feed on victims parallels how abusers often groom their elderly victims, manipulating them into harmful behaviors or exploiting them for personal gain. The preference for preying on homeless individuals could symbolize how abusers often target the most vulnerable among the elderly. Now, Clay's initial disbelief and subsequent attempts to manage his mother's condition without outside help reflect a common problem in elder abuse cases. Family members who either don't recognize the abuse or try to handle it privately out of shame or fear. Clay's desperate act of bringing home a prostitute for his mother to feed on represents the extreme and misguided actions family members might take when trying to cope with a difficult situation, inadvertently becoming complicit in the abuse. Clay's attempts to lock Emily up at night also parallel the inappropriate confinement that some elderly individuals face under the guise of protection. This highlights the fine line between ensuring safety and infringing on an elderly person's rights and dignity. Emily does not want to be locked up. Very disturbing, those scenes where he ties her to the bed. Now, this horror story, when viewed through the lens of elder abuse, provides a powerful commentary on an often overlooked societal issue. It highlights the vulnerability of the elderly, the potential for exploitation by trusted individuals, and complications of family dynamics in addressing abuse, and the devastating consequences when abuse goes unchecked. Now, I don't think that this is the lens the movie was intended to be seen through, but I found it an interesting intellectual exercise to think through. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing Daughter of Dr. Jekyll from 1957. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.